G'day viewers, it's taken me nearly 12 months to get this tank up and running looking the way it is now. So together we're going to go through everything, right from collecting and preparing the driftwood, building the hardscape, planting all the plants. We're going to do a dry start, filtration and CO2, and following my epic battle that I had with algae. All the way up to adding the livestock. And right at the end, I'm going to show you a bonus tip that'll change the look of your tank. Very simple and very effective. So a quick video is a good video. Let's get right into it. Okay viewers, the idea of this tank came from a picture I saw in a calendar in a transport depot in Adelaide, and I thought that would make a pretty cool looking tank. But first I was going to need some sticks, and lucky for me, a few years ago a tree blew over on my property and it had enough sticks and they were straight enough and the right size, and I thought, beauty, here's a go. So I cut the lengths into 20-inch lengths because the tank's 18 inches tall, and that way I'd have a couple of inches to play with if I need to level up or adjust anything. And then next step is just give the cut lengths a bit of a pressure wash just to knock off any loose pieces of bark or dirt or bugs or anything like that. Then I have an old bathtub, so I filled it full of sticks, then filled it full of water. Pretty simple, that's all I do to treat the wood. And then soak it and soak it and soak it some more. So after 3 days you can see all the tannins that have come out of that wood and turn that water absolutely black. So I drained the water and then refilled it. Then it took 4 days to go black, and then I drained it. Then it took a week to go black, and in the end I think it was probably about 2, maybe 3 months. By the time it was clear enough I could stay in there for a week and not really dirty the water at all. While all that wood was soaking, I didn't just lay around on the couch eating pies and watching the cricket. I thought I'd use my time productively. And because it's going to be deep at the back, the substrate's going to be fairly deep, I didn't want that dead zone down the bottom which creates all sorts of problems. So I used a couple of under gravel filter plates and make a sort of a slow moving plenum. It'll get oxygen all the way through that substrate and save a few dramas and a little bit of extra filtration as well. So I'll glue the plates together, and this is just some weed matting that you put in the garden to stop the weeds coming through. And because it's a 4 foot tank, I made two 2-foot sections so I could get it in past the brace. Here's the tank, which is 4 foot by 18 inches by 18 inches, which is 255 litres or 67 gallons for our friends in the US. So I just threw some cheap media I had laying around underneath, help with a bit of filtration, and install the plates over the top. And for the uplift tube, very cheap, very easy. It's just a piece of 13mm or 1/2 inch garden poly, which I punched a hole in the side and then put a small 4mm elbow in, which is used for that skinny little poly when you water your garden in your gardening systems. And then just put a 90-degree elbow on top. Simple. And here's how well it works. Just put the air line on that little elbow, stick it in, then adjust the airflow to adjust the amount of water you have moving through the tube. First piece in was this really cool looking stick I found. That big hole in the middle, it's all hollow behind that and hollow out to the end. So that'll be a cave for some inhabitants to hide in. And to make it fit in the bottom to look like it sinks down into the soil, I just lay it flat like that and I'll mark a pencil line and then take it over to the saw and I'll cut along that line. And there's that bottom edge there, which will lay flat on the bottom of the tank. And as we put the piece in, you can see that cut edge sits nice and flat on the bottom of the tank, and it slopes down, and once the substrate builds up around it, hopefully it'll look very, very natural, just like in real life. And then I just stood a few of the bigger pieces up, trying to get a feel of how I wanted it to look.
and all the skinny smaller ones at the back to try and give that bit of forced perspective. I've just glued them to pieces of slate or pieces of lava rock just so they stand up, otherwise they wouldn't stand up by themselves. And so once I had a pretty good idea of how I wanted it to look, it was just a matter of putting some silicone on the bottom of those bigger sticks so they'll stand up by themselves. It doesn't mean they're glued permanently to the tank because the silicone doesn't really stick to the wood, but if you put enough of a bead around the bottom, hopefully they'll stand up by themselves even in the current from the filtration. Now we'll install the uplift tube that we made before onto our little under-gravel filter / slow moving plenum. Just connect the air line and we'll tuck it down in that back corner and then zip tie it to the top drain so it can't go anywhere and you'll barely be able to see it. And having this slowly bubbling away, if worst comes to worst and the canister filter craps itself or something, at least there'll be some water movement in there so we won't lose all of our fish. And some of those medium-sized sticks didn't really want to stand up by themselves, so I siliconed some lava rock down. Then using some toilet paper and super glue, I glued the rocks to the sticks to make them a lot more stable. This is what I ended up with, viewers. I originally planned on having a lot more smaller sticks at the back to give it that really dense forest feel, but looking at that I thought there's probably not enough room for the fish, so that's how I left it. And because that silicone needs at least a week to cure and become aquarium safe, it was a good opportunity to just check it out and make sure I was happy with it. So every time I walked past the tank or went in the fish room, I'd have a little bit of a study to make sure I was happy with it. I did make a couple of very small changes, but I mostly stuck with the original plan, which I was pretty happy with. And then so after a week, on to the next step. So the next step is a substrate, and because for this one I've put my hand in my pocket and actually bought some proper aqua soil to do it properly, I thought it prudent to fill up as much as I can with this lava rock, which I bought from a hardware store. It's the stuff you use for your barbecue, so it's aquarium safe. And it's a lot cheaper than aqua soil, so I thought this a judicious use of my funds. And once all that lava rock's in place, you just tip the aqua soil over the top and try and build it up towards the back. Not much more really to be said about that. And so I didn't bury that front log under half a bag of soil. I grabbed my specialised tool just to fill in the front. It's fairly shallow at the front, but hopefully it'll still be able to grow some plants. Then I just use my other specialised tooling just to level everything out and get it where I want it. Now for the planting, first up is dwarf hairgrass. The idea being I'll have larger plants at the front and smaller plants at the back. So the hairgrass, I've just pulled it apart into little clumps and then stick it in. We've all seen it before, most of us have probably even done it. But don't worry, I'll put a list of the plants at the end. I'll have a video and I'll label everything so you know what everything is and what it looks like after it's been growing for a while. And of course spray it all down as we go along so nothing dries out. Next up is Monte Carlo. I lashed out and bought 2 of these tissue culture cups. So I'll just take it out, separate it all into little pieces and put that as the ground cover down the front. And because I'm doing a dry start, you didn't even need to bury the individual pieces. You could just drop them on top and over the next few weeks the roots will find their way down into that soil. This is some Liliopsis. It's the New Zealand one. I can't remember the name right now, but as I said, I'll list everything at the end. And it's to go down the front, so it'll be bigger than the hair grass at the back, if it grows, hopefully. Same thing, just break it up and just plant it out. This is some Cameroon moss, and it's got those really nice ferny frond-like leaves, I suppose you call them. So hopefully we can glue that to a few of those trees and give it that real rainforest feel. And this sort of depression which narrows its way up to the back have Monte Carlo in the front and then a smaller variety, HC Cuba, towards the back. So just stay with the theme, big at the front, small at the back. And for viewers that don't know what a dry start is, it's a way of starting the tank, particularly ground covers and mosses and things like that. And there's two main benefits. One is that it gives time for plants to establish themselves, like either in the roots or on the trees or rocks or whatever they're on, so they don't get washed away or float away in the water. And then number two is that because there's no water there, the plants have all got access to lots of CO2, so which helps them establish and grow a lot quicker. To achieve that, we'll seal the entire tank. We'll cover the top up in cling wrap or cling film, you know, the stuff you wrap your sandwiches in, and that'll trap in all that moisture and humidity and keep everything damp. And we'll have our lights on for 12 hours a day because we don't have to worry about algae because there's no water. And once a day we'll remove the cover and we'll air it out for 15 minutes and we'll give it a spray to keep everything damp. And with any luck, within around 4 weeks, we'll be ready to add some water. And after the first week, things were looking pretty good. Nothing had really died. Nothing had gone stupid yet, but a lot of the moss had little tiny light green pieces on the tip, which means they were growing. The Liliopsis wasn't doing anything fantastic. The hair grass had just not died, but it wasn't really growing at all, but hopefully everything was using all its energy to produce roots. And once I said every day give it a spray to keep everything damp and nice and humid. But this is where I made a bit of a mistake. So I was just using aquarium water out of a different tank, which I thought would be fine. But it turns out because it had nitrates and probably a bit of fertiliser in it, it set us up for a lot of trouble further down the track. But that's for later on in the video. But for now, we'll just spray it, cover it back up and check in another couple of weeks. So this is after 3 weeks and you can see everything is going really well. That Monte Carlo and the HC Cuba is really taking off. The hair grass has got a couple more little shoots and the Liliopsis is just the same. Those few Anubias nana-petite that I hadn't mentioned yet that I tied to those trees, they were looking okay and the moss was doing pretty well. So far so good. Also in week 3, we harvested the first crop of mushrooms which somehow found their way in the tank. Now I did throw those out. I did not send them down to Leongatha for that lady to try and poison a parents-in-law. So by week 4 of the dry start, things were looking pretty good. The Monte Carlo was taking off fairly well. The HC Cuba, not as good, but still going okay. The hair grass was starting to send out new shoots. The Liliopsis still looked the same as the day I put it in. And the moss was going okay, but that Anubias hadn't really attached itself. So because I've been spraying it every day, the water can't just disappear, so it has to go somewhere. So when it built up at the front, I just sucked some of it out. I took out about half a litre. And I thought with that Anubias not attached properly, I'll give it another couple of weeks just to be on the safe side. 6 weeks in and it's time to plant the rest of the plants. So first up, some Lobelia cardinalis, which is a terrestrial plant from North America, which I found grows pretty well, as long as you keep it trimmed so it grows nice and compact. Otherwise it gets a bit leggy. Next up, some Staragoin repens, which I'm going to plant either side of that log for a bit of a ground cover, and it's the same. If you keep it trimmed low, it'll spread out nice and wide and hopefully cover a fair bit of area either side of that log. Now for one of my favourite aquarium plants of all time, it's Hydrocotyl Japan. This plant grows fast, it's really versatile, it's got a lovely little leaf shape. So I'm going to plant a few along the front here, and I'm going to have some of it, I'm going to trim it low and train it to flow down over that log and along the front, and then some of it I'll let grow longer and I'll try and train it up around the trees so it'll look like some sort of jungle vine or something. And on this side, amongst the Hydrocotyl Japan, I'm going to plant some baby tears, which I'm not even going to attempt the Latin name for that one, but it'll be labelled at the end. And it grows similar, and it's fairly easy to grow, and it's a slightly different colour and slightly different leaf shape, so it should be a nice bit of a contrast. Time for filtration, and for me, this tank, the only filtration is a canister filter. Now my two big tips are tip number 1, leave the hoses out in the sun for a while to soften up. That's if you live somewhere where there is sun. It'll make it a lot more pliable and a lot easier to work with and bend around your stands. And tip number 2 is I'll keep the canister itself in a tub. Not only will it catch any water when it leaks or when you open it up to service it, it makes it real easy to slide in and out from under the stand. Now for the CO2, I've gone with an inline diffuser. And before you install it, it's best to check it to make sure it doesn't leak. So we're going to throw it in the tank there where it's nice and easy to see. And then power up the solenoid. And the instructions say you want to run it at least 30 psi. So we'll adjust it to 30 and then check for leaks. Now if you have bubbles coming out of the middle like that, or out of the pipe join like that, they need tightening up. And what you want to have is bubbles coming out of there. It means you're all good to go. And there's the CO2 diffuser on the return line of the canister. You want to get it as close to the canister itself as you can. It gives the bubbles more time to dissolve into the water. Now we add the drop checker, which will tell us how much CO2 is in the aquarium. So just add the solution and then invert it so the solution doesn't come in contact with the water. There's an air pocket in there. Then just place it in the tank somewhere where it's not directly going to get bubbles straight up it and give us a false reading. So blue means there's not enough, we need to turn the bubbles up. Green means she'll be right mate, it's pretty good. And yellow means holy crap, we're about to kill all our fish, so back it off a little bit. And here it is, the bubbles coming out of the return. They're nice and fine, and it does make the tank look a little bit hazy, which some people don't like. I don't mind it, but I think it's by far and away the best way if you've got a canister filter to add CO2 to a tank, because that diffuser isn't exposed to any light, it doesn't get algae growing on it, so it takes a lot longer to block up. And I have the solenoid on a timer. It comes on about 2 hours before the lights do, and it goes off about 4 or so hours before the lights do, and those plants are still purling flat out when the lights go out. So here's the tank full of water, that's why it's so cloudy. And about 2 hours after I filled it and connected the CO2, I found out why you don't use aquarium water for a dry start. All of that substrate was completely covered in brown algae that you couldn't see when there was no water in it. But 2 hours of the CO2, it all started purling, and God, what a horrible mess. and all of the wood was covered in this fungusy biofilm, and I just left it, just allowed nature to do its thing, and eventually it went away. So not only was everything covered in brown algae, about 3 or 4 days in we had the dreaded cyanobacteria, better known as blue-green algae, which came up in about 3 or 4, maybe 5 different spots and was starting to spread rapidly, so I thought I'd better get on top of that one pretty quick. And just to make life interesting, also had this fluffy, some of it was green, some of it was brown algae in patches all over the place. So the first thing to go had to be that blue-green algae, and because we don't have antibiotics for aquariums here in Australia, I use this Easy Life Blue Exit. And so I think you dose the tank for 5 days, I think from memory, and then you leave it for 2 weeks, and by the 10th day it was all gone. It worked really well. I was very happy with it. And then for this brown or green fuzzy algae that popped up, most of it I just removed with a pair of tweezers. Just a bit of time and a bit of mucking around and you can get most of it out intact. Just got to be patient, and every morning I'd stick my head in, have a look, pull a few pieces out, and I think eventually I got most of it under control, just removing it manually. And for those clumps of moss that were a bit hard to get to with the tweezers, or if they were really embedded in the plants and I didn't want to uproot any plants, I used this 2-hour Acarist algicide. So turn the pump off to stop the flow so it doesn't go everywhere, and just inject it straight on with a syringe. Very simple, and it killed it in about 2 or 3 days. Now surprisingly, I didn't get a lot of green spot algae, but I did get a bit earlier on in the beginning, so the best thing to scrape that off is just use a gift card. Won't scratch anything and it works really well. And if you can find one that's got at least one side that is white, it helps make those little green spots stand out a lot easier. And then about 3 or 4 weeks in, I started getting all of this string algae or hair algae, and I just found the best way to do that is get a stick, something that it'll grip to, and just spin it round and round and round, just like you're trying to pick up some spaghetti, and then pull it out manually. Takes a bit of time, but eventually you can get on top of it. Now I didn't need to fertilise for the first month or so, but then the Monte Carlo leaves beginning to go white and die, so I added some fertiliser. I added about 1/4 of the recommended rate, and the plants picked up, but then so did the algae, so I had to back it off. So then it was just a matter of tinkering around to find the happy medium between algae and plants. Now viewers, what tank build would be complete without that shot of the fish being poured into the tank and swimming around to have that nice music and all that atmosphere? So we'll do that now, and then we'll just have a bit of footage and I'll list and label all of the plants and all of the livestock. But stay to the end and don't miss out on that bonus tip. Now viewers, time for my bonus tip to change the look of your tank. This is just some plastic matting I've put on the top of the tank at the back, and because the light's in the middle, it'll shade the top half of the back wall of the tank, which will take us from this to this. And trust me, the camera does not do this justice. Such an easy thing to do and makes such an impact on the overall look of the tank. So I have one more species in quarantine to go in this tank, and spoiler alert, it's a bottom feeder, but I want one more fish to swim around, another schooling fish probably, to make a bit of a contrast, so some sort of small tetra or rasbora or something like that. So if you have any ideas, let me know down below. And I'd like to say a big thank you to the Princess of Plants herself, Tara from Tara's Tank Friends, who helped me out with the plant selection and gave me some great advice. I'll leave a link to her channel down below. Well viewers, that time again. So if you like leaving likes, leave a like. So as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Hey Dad, can you come here?
What is it?
Wait, never mind.
I was just bringing him a coffee.